Hey there, it's Crafty Jennabug. It's complete. My July 2023 junk journal is complete. If you are new here, don't know what I'm doing, this is part of a series I'm making for 2023 where I have challenged myself to make a junk journal for each month and decorate it throughout the month. It's been quite a challenge, but I'm still really enjoying it and learning a lot and, experimenting with different techniques. So, yeah, this one is ocean/beach themed. Got some die cut ocean themed decals on the front. Made a kind of sloppy patchwork cover, different fabrics and ribbons. I'm really I was really struggling with the bobbin on my sewing machine, so the sewing looks quite strange, but I like it. I like it a lot. It's quite thick and chunky. I get yeah. Overall, I am incredibly pleased with this, and let's see what I did. Now, there were the last video I made where I was working in this journal, part 5. There were still quite a few pages that needed to be completed, so you will get to see and get the explanation behind what I did for those. First things first, we have a little crab and a seashell in these little mesh pockets. I should just say in this mesh pocket because there is nothing in the back mesh pocket. The cover page has a seashell that was distressed on the back with vintage photo. A little bit of, this is either onion or potato packaging right here. Yeah, I really like that page. On the back, this was one of the pages I did off camera. I made a collage board early on into the making of this journal, and I used that for a pocket down here. And we have these two printables. I believe both of these came from theartscavenger.com, I believe. So there were a few places I got printables from. They were all free printables. Artscavenger.com, Artsy Fartsy Life, and there was a pin I found on Pinterest that led me to a page where they had a bunch of Creative Commons ocean themed images, and so the printables in here came from one of those 3 places. These little cards are distressed on the back. This one, I believe, was frayed burlap and vintage photo. For this one, I used Stormy Sky distress ink and covered the whole thing. Sat down a die cut, a seahorse die cut, and then used frayed burlap to go around it. And I really love the way that turned out. So those live in this pocket. Here, this was from that nautical pin. I absolutely love this image and made it very distressed. I crumpled it and uncrumpled it, took my dauber with vintage photo on it and distressed the edges. I ripped the edges, and then where it folded up, I ran the dauber along it to kind of make it look like it had seen some stuff. This is from a printable that 49 Dragonflies offered. I believe it was for a milestone on her YouTube channel. I cannot find the link for it anymore. Otherwise, I would link it. She made 4 season cards. The printable had 4 cards one for each season. And as soon as I saw this one, I knew I had to make an ocean-themed junk journal at some point during the summer. So that was the inspiration for this entire journal. And thank you. Thank you, Barbara. This was a little half page. I added some trim and some stamping, some washi tape, a little die cut, and some stamped images that I cut out and glued down. A little bit of scrap down here just to create a little ocean image. I left the back blank. I really like it, especially after all of this, just to have kind of like a palette cleanser. Felt nice. Here I have a decorated paper clip. We got a little piece of coral die cut. Folded the paper clip with some paper on both sides, added an eyelet and some beads. I don't know if you can see those beads, but there they are. Some little faux pearls and some little seed beads, and then this little guy. This tag I made from a napkin. Just used some Liquitex matte medium and basically decoupaged the napkin to this piece of cardstock. Added a little faux pearl, and the back is that color, and then I sewed around it. That's just the natural color of the cardstock I used. So that lives there. On this side, the other side of the paper clip, I just have a few of those blue seed beads and this seahorse bead. It just looks like it's swimming along in this ocean. This is part of an envelope I glued in to be pockets, and glued in. I sewed in the envelope to make it 2 pockets in the signature. This was a die cut I made on the Cricut, and I used a variety of Distress Oxide ink sprays to make it look really cool, I think. It just lives right there now. Over here, the other side of that pocket, I stamped "Wishing You Oceans of Joy." This is a homemade stamp I made and some dyed doily behind it. It makes me feel like it reminds me of like a coral reef. Here, this also is something I found on the Cricut. All right, this is also something I made on the Cricut. It's a tag with this cut out, so I backed it with a little bit of gray script paper, and then I backed it again with this purple paper, and I used some Distress Oxide inks, Kitsch Flamingo and Seedless Preserves to color. I love the way it looks kind of like a crown over the top of the octopus. Here I've got a little tuck spot with a stamped mermaid, a little bit of doily sticking out. This came from Artsy Fartsy Life. One of many cards of that from that printable. On the back I used some tumbled glass and looks like frayed burlap to distress, and I stamped homemade stamps on the back using peacock feathers. Made a little paper clip with some scrap fabric and some of that black netting I used for this. This is a magazine image that I was inspired to make after seeing a video by Natasha at Treasure Books. You can link the video. And she was making all sorts of embellishments and ephemera for journals using magazine pages, and I was incredibly inspired. So magazine image glued down to a piece of tea-dyed paper. Well, this one was tea-dyed, but I had some stamp negatives on the back when I clean, or not stamp, some stencil negatives on the back when I clean my stencils. If I use a, I used a stencil and then I took it and flipped it over on some paper and just rubbed to clean it off. And I love the stencil negatives a lot. So that just felt right. I sewed around it a few times, real crazily. And yeah, became a nice little journaling spot. Here's another one of those free printables from the nautical, I keep saying nautical, it's ocean themed, nautical, what have you. Anyway. Here's another printable from that ocean themed pin. I did the same thing I did for the other one and crumpled it up and distressed it. It was on white cardstock, but I altered it quite a bit with some vintage photo. Stuck it on this piece of it's packing paper that I cleaned my brayer off of. Added some of that black mesh, and voila, beautiful. This piece I made during Defemember, which is Louisa Heinzel and Barbara at 49 Dragonflies. Have a series they do in December where they have a prompt list for you to create a different piece of ephemera each day for 25 days in December. And this was one of the ones I did last year. It's they had an animal of the day, and it was the seahorse, and I believe the prompt was acetate, which is this. It was an envelope window, and I love it. I glued it down as a little pocket, and I stuck these little seaweed cards in there so that they stuck out off the side a little bit. Here I glued down a half page and used some frayed burlap to make it look a bit more sandy. Took a bit of cheesecloth and glued it down to look like the ocean breaking upon the shore. Made some little UV resin seashells and took some real seashells and hot glued them down to the page. And this was another printable, this is another card from the printable by Artsy Fartsy Life. Distressed the back in vintage photo. I love the way she looks like she's offering the sun. A little bit of this really thin blue textured paper. Actually, it pops up a lot in this journal because I thought it was so awesome. Sticking out the bottom. I skipped a page. This is the center of this signature. I loved it. I just added a poem about the ocean. It says, "The Sea of Sunset" by Emily Elizabeth Dickinson. This is the land the sunset washes. These are the banks of the yellow sea. Where it rose or whither it rushes, these are the western mystery. Night after night her purple traffic strews the landing with opal bales. Merchantmen poise upon horizons, dip and vanish with fairy sails. It was too pretty to do anything to. Here, I made another pocket. Got this tag that says "Be in the Moment" with some ocean. I just left it blank on the back. Little image of the ocean near where I live. Cut it out of a magazine. Some die cuts, some stamped images. Cute little collage in my opinion. Here I glued down some bigger cards with seaweed and seashells. Added some die cuts that I colored with Distress Oxide inks and a little bit of netting. Here I just made a little tuck spot using some packaging, a bit of some crazy like lace ribbon, and art scavenger printable piece. This was a vellum tag I found in my stash. Never seen it before. I think it came with like a thrift store find. I used Distress Oxide inks and some yellow alcohol ink to dye it, and then glued this die cut to it, and it is super cute. Here I have a belly band I made using part of a magazine page. This is the seahorse that I used to used that seahorse for this. And I figured it deserved to live right here on this belly band. I've got a little bit of decorative lace, or like a mesh ribbon glued behind it. Another Artsy Fartsy Life printable. I used a pull tab from my cat's wet food. It's usually a golden color. I used some brown alcohol ink to make it brownish. The back I glued some scrap packing paper to, and some of the back is peeking out, so before I glued it down I distressed it with water and walnut stain, Distress Oxide ink. I love this tag. Here I just wanted to leave this as journaling space, so I made a little cluster with 2 different kinds of mesh. We have this blue mesh ribbon and this black mesh. This image is from, where is it? A couple pages ago. This, was it that one? Yeah. This guy, I stuck it on some packing paper when I was dyeing it, and this was the result of me, because I brushed Vintage Photo over it, and so you could see the outline really well, and I thought it was amazing and decided to use it as a little bit of a cluster, and some faux flatback pearls glued down. I love this little cluster. And then the stitching from sewing on the belly band on the previous page, I love it. It's very simple, but lots of journal space there. The other half of the envelope is here. I took a stencil I made, cutting out die cuts, kept the paper that was left over and thought it would make an amazing stencil. Stenciled that on there with some chipped sapphire, and I believe I also used Salty Ocean first and then the chipped sapphire over. This was part of the collage board that I made and cut down into various different things. Glued the stamped image. They swam out to sea. I found that in a Tim Holtz sticker clippings book. Added a hole reinforcement that I used chipped sapphire to dye. This string I found in my yard. I don't know what it was doing or why it was there, but it felt like it fit the theme. On the back I stamped a little lighthouse image, and that is the tag. It just lives right there. I added more of that crazy white, this stuff, like ribbon lace, I'm not sure. I found it at the Dollar Tree. I dyed this using a variety of Distress Oxide inks, the sprays, and just glued it there so that it stuck out. I really like it. Here I have taken the envelope, which I had dyed previously with coffee and Distress Oxide inks, and I just ripped some of this paper to make it feel kind of like a feeding frenzy, you know, like when the giant balls of small fish swirl around in the ocean and it causes all the other, you know, predators to come in and, you know, they just like gobble them up. That's what that made me feel like. Here I have made a tuck spot with some, I did sew it into the book, with a piece of paper that what did I do with, how did I do that? I think I took the jelly plate and laid down a doily and then pressed this paper onto the jelly plate to get that image, and thought it was really cool. It reminded me of waves. And then I stuck an actual doily that I dyed and part of it there, and this is a wooden cutout, like a laser cut. I found these at the Dollar Tree. I added that after I added the tag because of the pink. And that's another one of those kelp cards. And this paper is a piece of cardstock that when I did a paint pour, and I had a lot of paint sitting underneath and just dipped the paper in it, and it made this beautiful pattern. And that is, I just glued it down, and that is the card for this. In case you can't tell, I sewed this in place. Oh, and at the top I've got some pearls. Here I took a stamped image of an octopus on some scrap paper, glued it down to make a tuck spot, added this card from Artsy Fartsy Life, used old paper and vintage photo to distress it. I really like it. Little tiny half page. I took some scrap paper and some, I stamped "Fill your life with sunshine and your heart with love," and added this fish tag. On the back of that, I made a little image with some die cuts. I used Distress Oxide inks. I embossed this with some clear embossing. I don't know if you can see, but it has some texture to it now. Took this die cut and I used Kitsch Flamingo to color it pink, and then I came in with some seedless preserves and some stamps and stamped over it so that it had more texture. On this page I have a few die cuts. This seashell border is from a Craft Punch. A few die cuts I just dyed with various different Distress Oxide inks and sprays. Just glued it down to make an image. This was a tag from a piece of scrapbook paper, and I grunged it up a bit, made it look like a shark took a bite out of it, and thought it was quite fun, like a tour pamphlet fell into the ocean and was destroyed. This is part of the collage board, fun 3D sticker, and then it flips. Used a bit of fabric to adhere it. Dance with the waves, move with the sea, let the rhythm of the water set your soul free. That is quoted to Christy Ann Martine. Little printable going on over here, backed with some of that white, or some of that dark blue, really thin fabric-like paper. Some stamping. I love it. And that is the end of the first signature. Second signature, I've got a beautiful seahorse card I distressed up and glued down there. Love it. Here I made another tuck spot. I used the oxide inks to dye this die cut, and then I did more of the clear embossing powder on it. You can't really see it, but it gives it a texture. Another fish card. Here, this is another thing I made during Defemember. It's a notepad, and this is the last page. I stuck it over the page and glued down the back page so that this could be some journaling space. And then I glued down this swirl from playing with my Sizzix die cut machine, and it looked like a wave. So this is journaling space, and over here is the rest of the notepad, and you have different little pages. And then this is the second to last page in the notepad, and I glued it down here. So the notepad had one more page. I basically straddled it over the page and glued down the pages that were touching this page in the journal. I found a magazine image of a seashell, glued it down, added a little bit of scrap paper that I had tested my sewing machine out on, left the strings loose, found this card as part of a scrapbook pad, backed it with some packing paper, and it lives right here now. Love the beach. Seemed very fitting. Another belly band. It's actually a double belly band, but I don't have anything. Oh no, it's not a double belly band. I fib. Another belly band, part of that collage board, some thread, some mesh, another one of those circular printable shell images. I made a little booklet with some scraps. This image I found on that ocean themed pin. Used some thicker paper to make the cover, a little bit of ribbon, and sewed. And in here we have some scraps of paper that I decorated with distress inks, a little bit of doily in the middle, and that's that. Lots of journaling space. Little tiny half page, I took a die cut and made it into a tuck spot. Have a little bit more die cut here, some seashell cards, backs distressed. Here I have a poem framed by a few pieces of paper, Sea Calm by Langston Hughes. How still, how strangely still the water is today. It is not good for water to be so still that way. This little half page, I did some stamping, I did some embossing with bubbles, I don't know, yeah, there they are, with clear embossing powder. And I took an octopus image, vintage octopus image, distressed it and glued it down. This is part of a jelly plate. I took a little piece of paper, and this is a belly band. I don't have anything to stick in it, but it's a vertical belly band with this image I found glued to it. This page, I cut this out with the Cricut and just did some distress spray on it to make them look a bit more realistic, like shells with the different textures and colors in them. And I added the sea, once it casts its spell, holds one in its net of wonder forever. And that's quoted to Jacques Cousteau. I added this little net, and when I found this quote, I knew it had to go on this page because I had nothing here for a while, just the net. So this is one of my favorite pages. I love this sticking out. In the back journaling space, I did a few stamped images. Here I glued this piece down to be a pocket, stamped on it, added this tag that says Life's a Voyage, or it says Life's Voyage. Distressed the back. Did I just say dispressed? Distressed the back with vintage photo and just a quick spray of some prize ribbon. Here I have another one of those magazine image tags. This time a sea turtle glued onto a bit of scrap paper that was decorated with sprays. So that's some journaling space. It lives in this pocket made out of packing paper and decorated with a few different things, some die cuts, some border punch, some blue mesh net, and this image that came off of a scrapbook page. Another pocket made with the collage board. Here, inside this pocket, I decorated the back with that stencil I made again. This came out of a printable. This, last summer, my local library did a summer reading program where the theme was Oceans of Possibilities, and one of the adult prizes was a few little notepads that have this image on it. Well, it fits the theme, right? So I crumpled it up, one of the sheets, crumpled it up, distressed the edges, folded it so it looked like it had been in the ocean. This said 2022 on it, so I wanted to kind of hide it, make it look a bit more vintage. And yeah, just went to town with the vintage photo and the frayed burlap. The crumples, I would, after I crumpled it, I saw where they were sticking up, and I would just run my little dauber. I love it. I think it is quite fitting. I just love it. The center piece of this signature is the Song of Mardi by Herman Melville. Like the fish of the bright and withering fin, bright fish, diving deep as high soars the lark, so far, far, far doth the maiden swim, wild song, wild light, in still oceans dark. I found this image, and I believe it was in that ocean-themed pin, and just had to print it out for the centerpiece as soon as I saw it. And so it lives here now, in the middle, and I really did not want to do much to it, except add this inspiring little, I don't know if it's if it's an entire poem or part of a poem, but I love it. This, I just glued this card to. It has a nautical compass points on it, and it is journaling space. On this page, I made a tuck spot using, it was a negative, another stencil negative I had used Distress Oxide inks on, set it down against the paper. Some faux flatback pearls glued down. Oh, that's kind of stuck in there. And this little tag that came from a piece of scrapbook paper, used peacock feathers to distress the back and spritz some water. Wiped it off, and boom. I've just loved the way these two colors played off each other. Added a little fabric tag with some scrap fabric from cutting off the cover, trimming the cover, and some of that black mesh. Oops. This page I left blank. I was too in love with it to cover it. It's part of a jelly print. This was, the other part of that crazy page that I glued down for a pocket. It was a dictionary page, and I glued this dyed doily to and added Twilight at Sea by Amelia B. Welby. The twilight hours like birds flew by, as lightly and as free. 10,000 stars were in the sky, 10,000 on the sea. For every wave with dimpled face that leaped up on the air had caught a star in its embrace and held it trembling there. On the back, I took one of those circle seashell elements and added a bunch of die-cut greenery, ocean greenery behind it, so that it's kind of like spiraling out around it and made it stick out on the other side. I dyed them with various Distress Oxide ink sprays and ink pads. Took a piece of scrap paper, another little piece of scrap paper, sewed them together, glued them to this harder cardstock because they were pretty flimsy, and made a tuck spot for this tag I made with the collage board. Another one of those 3D stickers. I'm not really fond of the fact that you can see this, but I'm gonna overlook it for now. Added a little bit of twine and distressed the back. Added some bubble stamps. Tuck spot made with some scrap paper, more of that net. I believe it was an onion packaging for onions. Another one of those 3D stickers. And this tag I stamped on the back with a homemade stamp. More little pages. Added some mesh, another one of those circular seashells, and a die cut of coral that I colored with different Distress Oxide inks and sprays. Here, this was part of a card, or this card came from a scrapbook page that had a bunch of things you could cut out. I stamped Ahoy. It flips open. Used fabric, and I made a little collage, underwater collage, various different things. There are border punch pieces here and here, some fabric, scrap papers, another border punch, and some die cuts. This was made with the Cricut, and then I used some packaging paper I cleaned a brayer off of behind it, and it holds these two little seashell tags. Here, I took a card from a scrapbook paper. It says, if you're lucky enough to live at the beach, you're lucky enough. Made it a tuck spot for this card. I used my homemade stamp on the back of, and a little sand dollar die cut. This page I had to leave blank. I loved it far too much. It's a vintage anatomical drawing of a lobster, and it just makes me happy. On the back of it, I glued down The Sea by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Behold the sea, the opaline, the plentiful and strong, yet beautiful as is the rose in June, fresh as the trickling rainbow of July. Sea full of food, the nourisher of kinds, purger of earth and medicine of men, creating a sweet climate by my breath, washing out harms and griefs from memory, and in my mathematic ebb and flow, giving a hint of that which changes not. Rich are the sea gods, who gives gifts but they? They grope the sea for pearls, but more than pearls. They pluck force thence, and give it to the wise, for every wave is wealth to Daedalus. Wealth to the cunning artist who can work this matchless strength. Where shall he find, O waves, a load your Atlas shoulders cannot lift? I, with my hammer pounding evermore the rocky coast, smite the Andes into dust, strewing my bed, and in another age rebuild a continent of better men. Then I unbar the doors, my paths lead out the exodus of nations. I disperse men to all shores that front the hoary main. Well said. Here, I took some streamers that were left over from the 4th of July, those little poppers you pull. I don't know where I put them, but they look like little bottles, and you pull the top and it, the bottom bursts forth with all these little streamers, and it makes a popping sound. And I saved them and decided they would make amazing tentacles for a jellyfish. So I took part of a paper doily that I had dyed, the middle section, and cut it to look like a jellyfish, and just used them. This is one of my favorite pages. It's so simple, but I love it. It's got a lot of movement going. Here I just glued down one of those tags from Artsy Fartsy Life, framed it with a little bit added Smell the Salty Air. And here, one of the magazine, this was actually a calendar page, tags that I made. I added a little seahorse charm for the beautiful seahorse here. Did some crazy stitching around it. And then it folds down into journaling space. It says it's all about today. Got some fabric here to attach it. And another one of those cards from Artsy Fartsy Life hidden behind it, so you can just see the tentacles peeking out. Or is that a sea snake? That's a sea snake, my apologies. And the last page I left blank, and again there's nothing in here. So that is my July 2023 junk journal. I hope you enjoyed this flip through. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed making every page in this book. It made me want to go to the beach. So, thanks so much for watching. I look forward to the August journal and getting to work in it. We're over the hump now, I've gone over halfway through this year-long series, and part of me is ecstatic to have it end, and the other part of me is very sad to have it end. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.